My name is Mark, and I died in my kitchen at the age of 45. I was a firefighter in Texas, a job I loved even with all the danger it carried. I was also a husband and a father to two young children, a little girl named Emily and a boy named Jake. My life was a delicate balance of intense, exhausting shifts at the fire station and cherished moments at home with my family. I never imagined that one ordinary morning would be the last time I'd live as I knew it. That day began like any other. The sun was just beginning to peek through the blinds as I shuffled into the kitchen to make breakfast. Emily and Jake were still asleep upstairs, and my wife, Sarah, was getting ready for work. I had just finished brewing coffee and was reaching for the eggs when a sharp pain suddenly gripped my chest. It wasn't like anything I'd felt before. No gradual discomfort or warning signs, just a sudden, crushing weight that made my breath catch and my knees buckle. The moment caught me completely off guard. My hands trembled as I tried to steady myself against the counter. I could hear Sarah calling from the bedroom, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. The pain intensified, radiating down my left arm and up into my jaw. I remember thinking, this can't be happening to me, not now. Then, without warning, the world tilted and went black. Before that instant, my life had been a whirlwind of activity and love. I was proud of my work, knowing I saved lives and helped people when they were at their most vulnerable. Even though the job was demanding and sometimes terrifying, it gave me purpose. At home, I was a dad who tried to make time for bedtime stories and weekend soccer games, even when exhaustion threatened to pull me under. Sarah and I had built a life on trust and laughter, raising our children with hope for the future. But suddenly, all of that was gone. There was no pain, no struggle, just a profound silence. I did not understand what had happened at first, only that my body was no longer responding. The sharp edges of life dissolved into something softer, emptier, yet strangely calm. As consciousness slipped away, I became aware of a sensation unlike anything I'd experienced before. It was as if I were no longer inside my body, but hovering just above it. I looked down and saw myself slumped against the kitchen counter, eyes closed, face pale and still. I could see Sarah rushing in, her voice breaking as she called my name, the fear flooding her expression like a cold tide. Her hands trembled as she grasped my shoulders, disbelief and panic etched deep into every line of her face. I felt no pain, no fear, only a strange detachment mixed with an overwhelming tenderness for my family. Watching Sarah's distress was like witnessing a nightmare unfold from which I could not wake. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice cracking as she begged for help. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to tell her it was going to be okay, but I was silent, invisible, unable to cross the boundary between life and death. Time seemed to stretch and collapse all at once. I saw the flashing red and blue lights outside as the paramedics burst through the front door, their urgency filling the room. They worked frantically, pressing on my chest, attaching wires, shouting orders. I watched as they tried to bring me back, their faces masks of concentration and hope, but I was already somewhere else. Detached from my physical self, I was surrounded by a quiet that felt like a vast empty room. The sounds of the kitchen, the frantic voices, the sirens, the beeping machines faded into a distant echo. In this space, I sensed a stillness deeper than sleep, a kind of waiting I didn't understand. Though I was separated from the world I had known, I remained intensely aware of it. I could see my children sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware of the crisis unfolding below. I thought of Emily's bright smile and Jake's boundless energy, of the small moments I had taken for granted, the way Emily would cling to my hand when she was scared, and how Jake's laughter filled the house like music. A wave of sorrow and love swept over me. I wished I could tell them I was still near, even if they could not see me. I remembered the life I had lived, the dangers I faced, the calls that had shaken me, the friends I had lost in the line of duty. I thought of Sarah, her strength and kindness, and the quiet sacrifices she made for our family. I wondered how she would cope without me, how the children would understand this sudden absence. The transition from life to death was neither dramatic nor terrifying. It was simply a passage, a crossing into something unknown yet strangely familiar. I did not feel judgment or fear, only a profound sense of having left behind the physical struggles of my existence. In that moment, I understood how fragile life is, how unpredictable and precious. One moment, I was a man preparing breakfast for his family. The next, I was something else entirely, an observer of the world I had just left, caught between two realities. As the paramedics continued their efforts downstairs, I floated in that silent space, torn between the past and the unknown future. I was no longer bound by time or place, yet I was still deeply connected to the people I loved. The pain of separation was real, but so was the peace of release. I realized then that death is not an end, but a transition, a doorway that opens unexpectedly, changing everything in an instant. What came next, I did not know. But for now, I was here, hovering above the life I had lived, caught in the quiet before the next great step. After that quiet moment of separation, I found myself moving, though not in any way I had ever experienced before. It was as if I had been released from the weight of my body, floating gently upward and away from the kitchen where my life had ended. The world below grew smaller, the frantic scenes of emergency responders fading into a blur of colors and sounds. I was no longer bound by the physical, no longer tethered to the chaos and pain that had seized my last moments. Instead, I was enveloped by a calmness that defied description. The air around me was thick with a kind of stillness. Yet inside that stillness, I felt an expanding awareness. It was as if my senses had opened in a way I'd never known, hearing, seeing, feeling beyond the limits of flesh and bone. I could sense the love and pain radiating from my family, like invisible threads connecting us even now. I watched from this new vantage point as Sarah knelt by my lifeless body, tears streaming down her face. Her sobs shook the room, raw and desperate. I could see the helplessness in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she reached out to me. The sight pierced me more deeply than any physical pain ever had. I wanted to reach back, to hold her, to tell her I was still with her, but the distance between us was real and impassable. All I could do was watch. Upstairs, the children stirred, drawn by the sudden noise and commotion. I saw Emily's small face appear at the doorway, confusion etched in her wide eyes as she called out for me. Jake followed, clutching his blanket, his innocent voice trembling as he asked where I was. Their fear was palpable, a heavy weight pressing down on my newfound freedom. From this place outside of time and space, I was a silent witness to their grief. It was a strange and painful paradox, to be free from suffering yet bound by the emotional currents that tethered me to those I loved. I felt their sorrow like a tangible presence, as if their pain was something I could hold in my hands. Yet, amid the grief, there were moments of profound love. I saw Sarah gather the children into her arms, trying to shield them from the harsh reality she could barely face herself. I saw neighbors arrive, bringing food and support, their faces full of concern and compassion. I witnessed the small acts of kindness that ripple through a community in crisis, the phone calls, the prayers, the quiet hugs. It struck me then how deeply connected we are, even when separated by the greatest divide. The bonds of family, friendship, and love do not end with death. They persist, shaping the world in ways I'd never fully appreciated before. As I drifted further from the physical world, the scene below began to blur, colors melting together like watercolors in the rain. The sounds of sirens and voices dimmed, replaced by a vast, gentle silence. Yet within that silence was a presence, something vast and unknowable, yet profoundly comforting. I realized I was moving toward a light, not a harsh or blinding light, but a soft, radiant glow that seemed to pulse with life itself. It was a light that welcomed without judgment, that embraced without condition. Though I did not understand where it was taking me, I felt a deep trust growing inside me, a sense that I was not alone. In that moment, memories flooded me, not just of my life, but of the moments I had cherished most. The laughter of my children, the warmth of Sarah's smile, the pride I felt standing alongside my firefighting brothers and sisters. These memories were not just images, they were threads of my identity, woven into the fabric of who I was. I saw myself in these memories, not as the man I had been in my final moments, but as the sum of all my hopes, dreams, and struggles. I was more than a body or a job. I was a collection of love and experience, pain, and joy. And yet, even as I embraced this new awareness, a part of me remained anchored to the world I had left. I thought of Sarah and the children again, wondering how they would carry on without me. I felt the ache of separation, the longing to be near them once more. But this new existence offered something else, a glimpse beyond the veil of mortality, a hope that life continues in ways I had never imagined. As I floated in this vast space, I became aware of other presences, beings of light and energy whose forms were fluid and shifting. They did not speak in words, but communicated through feelings and images. Their presence was soothing, like a balm to the confusion and fear that had gripped me moments before. They seemed to understand my pain and love, acknowledging the ties that bound me to the earth and those I had left behind. I sensed their gentle encouragement, a silent assurance that my journey was only beginning. From this elevated perspective, I saw life continuing below, Sarah holding the children close, the paramedics working tirelessly, friends and family gathering in prayer. The world moved on, but I was no longer part of its immediate struggles. Instead, I was a witness to its beauty and heartbreak, its resilience and tenderness. In this state, I felt a profound lesson unfolding before me, that death is not a severing of connection, but a transformation of it. The love we share does not die. It changes form and endures beyond the limits of flesh. I realized then that my own journey would involve learning to navigate this new reality, to understand the ties that bind me and the truths that await. I did not yet know what awaited beyond this luminous space, but I was no longer afraid. As I moved deeper into the light, I carried with me the faces of my family, the echoes of their love and grief, and the unspoken promise that I would find a way to be with them again, though not in the way I had known before. This transition was not an end, but a beginning, a passage from one existence to another. And though I was still coming to terms with what that meant, I felt an unfolding peace, a quiet hope that whatever lay ahead would reveal the deeper mysteries of life and love. For now, I was simply here, floating, observing, feeling the threads of connection stretch beyond the veil, linking me to the world I had loved and left behind. As I drifted deeper into the luminous space, a presence began to take form before me, radiant and serene, yet unmistakably powerful. He was not what I expected. This was Jesus, but not the distant, stern figure I had sometimes imagined in church. Instead, he was clothed in light that seemed to pulse with life itself, and his eyes held a depth that stretched across time and space, filled with compassion that reached into the very core of my being. When he looked at me, I felt completely known, not just for who I was in life, but for every thought, every fear, every hope I had ever held. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a profound love that settled over me like a warm embrace. I wanted to speak, to ask all the questions swirling inside me, but before I could, he began to teach me something I had never fully understood, the true nature of miracles. Jesus explained that miracles were not random events or supernatural exceptions to the laws of nature. He said they were natural expressions of divine love, faith, and alignment with God's greater plan. I was surprised. I had always thought of miracles as rare and mysterious, something that happened only to a chosen few or in desperate moments. But he told me that miracles begin within the heart and mind, through surrender and belief in the impossible. He showed me a vision of a woman praying with uncertainty. Her words were hesitant, filled with phrases like, "I hope," and "if it be your will." Her prayer seemed to falter, dimmed by doubt. Jesus explained that when we say, "I hope," it implies a lack of certainty about God's presence or willingness to listen. Instead, he said, we should pray with confidence, knowing that God hears us always. He demonstrated how prayers filled with certainty pierce through darkness, while hesitant ones hover aimlessly, unable to reach their destination. Next, he revealed a man praying for a trivial matter, using the phrase, "if it be your will," repeatedly. Jesus pointed out that when praying for things he has already promised, such as healing or peace, we should declare his will boldly rather than question it. He emphasized that our prayers should reflect trust in God's goodness and the promises made through faith, not uncertainty or bargaining. Then, he showed me a woman praying for a sick friend. but her words were heavy with feelings of unworthiness and shame. Her prayer seemed chained, weighed down by the belief that she was too flawed to be heard. Jesus told me that we are worthy not because of what we do, but because of his sacrifice. He urged me to approach God as a beloved child, acknowledging sins without dwelling in shame, and to understand that God's love is unconditional. As I witnessed these transformations, I saw how prayer changes when it is offered with faith and trust. The prayers that once seemed weak and unsure became strong and radiant, breaking through shadows and touching the divine. It was as if the very act of praying with certainty and grace opened a channel for miracles to flow naturally. Jesus then spoke of surrender, not as giving up, but as opening oneself fully to God's plan, even when it defies human understanding. He told me that miracles require aligning our hearts with divine love, releasing control, and embracing the impossible with faith. This surrender, he said, is not weakness, but the source of true strength. As he spoke, I understood that the miracles I had witnessed in my life, saving others from fire, surviving dangerous calls, were not just chance or luck. They were reflections of this divine alignment, moments when faith, love, and surrender converged to bring about what seemed impossible. Jesus' presence was like a light shining into every corner of my soul, dissolving doubts and fears I hadn't even realized I carried. He showed me that miracles are not just extraordinary events, but the natural outcome of a heart fully attuned to God's love. I wanted to ask him more to understand how I could live this truth in my life, but his voice was gentle yet firm. He reminded me that my journey was not finished, that I had a mission to share this understanding with others. He said that the world needed to hear the truth about miracles, not as distant wonders, but as accessible, everyday expressions of divine love. Though the light around him was inviting, promising peace and rest, I felt a stirring inside, a call to return, to live with this new clarity and faith. Jesus assured me I would not be alone and that his presence would accompany me wherever I went. In that radiant realm, I saw again the faces of my family, the friends I had left behind, and the countless lives touched by the fire I fought daily. I understood now that miracles were woven through all these connections, waiting to be recognized and embraced. Jesus' teaching transformed not just my understanding of prayer, but my entire perspective on life and faith. I realized that true miracles start with the courage to pray boldly, to trust deeply, and to surrender completely to God's love. As the light around us began to soften, signaling that this encounter was drawing to a close, I felt a profound gratitude swelling in my heart. I knew that what I had learned here was a gift, one I was meant to carry back into the world. Jesus gave me a final look, one of encouragement and love, and told me that my work was not yet done. He reminded me to share the truth about prayer and the nature of miracles, to help others see that faith is not about hoping uncertainly, but about trusting confidently. The radiant realm began to fade gently, and I felt myself moving back toward the world I had left. Though I was reluctant to leave this place of peace and understanding, I knew that I had to return. There were people waiting for me, my family, my community, and a message I was meant to live and share. As the light dimmed around me, I carried with me the clarity Jesus had given me, that miracles are not exceptions, but expressions of divine love, accessible to all who pray with faith and surrender. This truth would guide me as I stepped back into the life I thought I had lost, forever changed by what I had seen. The return was sudden, like being pulled back through a tunnel of light and sound. One moment I was enveloped in that radiant peace. The next I was gasping for air, my lungs burning as the hospital room came into focus. I lay surrounded by machines, their steady beeping, a lifeline to the world I had left behind. Doctors and nurses hovered nearby, their faces masks of concentration and hope. I was alive, breathing, awake, but the memories of what I had just experienced clung to me like a second skin. My recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The medical team told my wife and family that I had been clinically dead for over 20 minutes. They expected brain damage, lasting impairments, or worse. But I emerged from that ordeal with my mind clear and my body surprisingly strong. It was as if the light I had seen had restored something deep within me, a renewal that defied explanation. Reuniting with Sarah and the children was both joyous and bittersweet. Their relief washed over me in waves, mixed with the lingering shock of what had happened. I held Emily and Jake close, feeling the warmth of their small bodies and the steady beat of their hearts against mine. In that moment, I understood with crystal clarity that my time on earth was not yet finished, that I had been given a second chance for a purpose greater than I had ever imagined. The lessons I learned in that luminous realm stayed with me, changing the way I saw everything. I no longer prayed with uncertainty or hesitation. Instead, my prayers were filled with confidence and trust, knowing that God was listening and that miracles were not distant exceptions but natural expressions of divine love. At the fire station, my colleagues noticed a difference in me. I was calmer, more centered, carrying a quiet strength that seemed to radiate from within. The dangers of the job hadn't changed, but my perspective had. I faced each call with a renewed sense of purpose, believing not only in the possibility of miracles, but in their inevitability when faith and surrender aligned. At home, my relationships deepened. I listened more intently to Sarah's worries and joys, held my children with greater tenderness, and shared with them the faith that had transformed me. I began to speak openly about the truth I had seen, that prayer matters, that God is always present, and that miracles can happen when we open our hearts fully. Friends and neighbors who had heard about my near death experience approached me with questions and doubts. Some were skeptical, others hopeful. I didn't have all the answers, but I shared my story honestly, emphasizing the power of faith and the importance of trusting God's will. I encouraged them to pray boldly, to release fear and doubt, and to believe in the love that underpins all creation. The transformation was not without challenges. There were days when the weight of what I had witnessed felt overwhelming, when doubts crept in, and the pain of what my family had endured threatened to pull me under. But the clarity of Jesus' teaching anchored me. I learned to surrender those moments too, offering them up in prayer and trusting that even the struggles were part of a greater plan. As time passed, I saw changes not only in my own life, but in those around me. Prayers that had once seemed unanswered began to bear fruit. Small miracles, healing, reconciliation, unexpected blessings became more frequent and evident. I witnessed how faith, when embraced fully, could transform despair into hope and fear into peace. This journey deepened my understanding of what it means to live with purpose. I realized that my near death experience was not just a story to tell, but a mission to fulfill. I was called to be a messenger of the truth about miracles, not as distant wonders, but as accessible realities grounded in faith, love, and surrender. Every day since my return has been an opportunity to live that message. Whether at the fire station, at home, or in my community, I strive to embody the peace and confidence I found beyond the veil. I encourage others to see their prayers as powerful conversations with a loving God who hears and responds. Though I once feared death as an end, I now understand it as a passage, a transformation that reveals the depth of God's love and the promise of new beginnings. My time on earth continues, enriched by the knowledge that miracles are always within reach for those who believe. In this renewed life, I carry the light of that heavenly encounter with me, a beacon to guide me through the darkest moments, and a reminder that faith is the key to unlocking the miraculous. Life after my near-death experience was not simply a return to routine. It was a profound transformation that touched every part of my being. I was the same, Mark, the firefighter, the husband, the father, but inside I carried a new peace and an unshakable trust in the miraculous. That trust reshaped how I lived, prayed, and related to everyone around me. Prayer, once a hopeful whisper, became a powerful conversation. I no longer approached God with hesitation or doubt. Instead, I prayed with boldness and certainty, knowing that my words carried weight because they were spoken from a heart aligned with divine love. I discovered that faith is not a fragile thing, but a steady flame that illuminates even the darkest moments. At home, this change was the most visible. Sarah noticed it first, the calmness in my voice, the steadiness in my gaze. Our conversations deepened as I shared the insights I had received, not in preachy terms, but as a testament to what I had experienced. Emily and Jake felt it too. I was more present, more patient, more attentive to their needs and fears. I took time to teach them about faith, not as a set of rules, but as a living relationship with God who listens and cares deeply. At the fire station, my colleagues saw a new strength in me. The dangerous calls didn't seem as overwhelming because I carried the certainty that miracles are real and accessible. I prayed for protection, not out of fear, but out of trust. And I witnessed moments when things turned around in ways that defied explanation. These experiences spread quietly among my team, fostering a renewed sense of hope and courage. I became an advocate for understanding miracles as natural expressions of God's love, not rare exceptions reserved for saints or the fortunate. I told my story openly, not to seek attention, but to encourage others to open their hearts. I urged them to pray boldly, to trust in God's promises, and to surrender their fears. Many were skeptical at first, but as they witnessed changes in their own lives, the seeds of faith began to grow. The transformation rippled beyond my immediate circle. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers reached out, sharing their own struggles and hopes. I listened and prayed with them, guiding them to see that their prayers matter and that God's love is unwavering. It became clear to me that miracles are not just about dramatic healings or life-saving interventions. They are found in everyday moments of grace, peace, and unexpected blessings. Living with this purpose was not always easy. There were days when doubt crept in, when the burdens of life pressed hard, and when the pain of loss and fear threatened to overshadow my faith. But I had learned to surrender those moments too, offering them up in prayer and trusting that even trials are part of the divine plan. This surrender brought a peace that no circumstance could shake. I saw firsthand how faith could transform despair into hope. People who once felt broken found healing. Relationships that were strained began to mend. I witnessed forgiveness flourish where bitterness had taken root. These were the miracles Jesus had shown me, accessible, natural, and born of love and trust. This journey deepened my understanding of what it means to live with purpose. My near-death experience was not just a story to tell, it was a mission to fulfill. I was called to be a messenger of the truth about miracles, to help others recognize the divine love already at work in their lives, and to encourage them to embrace faith boldly. Every day since that moment in the kitchen, I have strived to embody this message. Whether at the fire station, at home, or in my community, I carry the light of that heavenly encounter as a beacon. It guides me through challenges and reminds me that miracles are always within reach for those who believe. I want everyone who prays to understand this. Prayer is not a timid hope, but a confident declaration. It is a powerful tool given by God to connect us with His love and to bring about transformation. When we pray with boldness and surrender, miracles unfold, not because God is persuaded, but because our hearts align with His will. My life is no longer defined by fear of death or uncertainty about what comes next. Instead, it is marked by a steady faith that embraces the miraculous in everyday moments. I walk forward knowing that God is always present, always listening, and always ready to act. To anyone reading this, I offer this encouragement. Open your heart, pray with confidence, trust in the love that surrounds you. Recognize the miracles already at work in your life and be willing to surrender your doubts and fears. Faith is not about perfection, but about relationship, a relationship with a God who loves you beyond measure and who wants to walk with you through every step of your journey. Miracles are not distant wonders. They are expressions of divine love waiting to be embraced. Believe this with all your heart, and you will see how your life begins to change in ways you never thought possible. I am Mark, a firefighter, a husband, and a father. I died, I was shown the truth, and I was given a second chance. This is my story, not just of death and return, but of living with purpose, faith, and the power of miracles.